Welcome to episode 250 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Mark Anderson, CEO of Collingwood.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who likes his beer cold and his pies hot, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and I do like my beer cold, and I do like my hot pies. I'm actually recording this after the Pies won their first final in the 2019 AFL Final Series, beating Geelong in the qualifying final. Very happy man as a Pies fan. If you've been listening to this podcast for 49 episodes before this one, you should know that I'm a Collingwood supporter. I'm very pleased to have Mark Anderson, CEO of the Collingwood Football Club, on the podcast today as part of our Sports Geek CEO series. My name is Sean Callanan. You can find me on the internet. Simply put Sean Callanan into the Google machine or Bing. If you use Bing, use Bing. You can find me at Sean Callanan on most social media platforms, or at Sports Geek. If you want to follow all things Sports Geek, you can contact me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, and you can always find the podcast at sportsgeekhq.com, or you can find it on Apple Podcasts or Pocket Casts. I don't feel like I've given Pocket Casts a shout out recently. It is my favourite podcast app, but you can use and find Sports Geek podcast on most platforms. I think now you can even just Google Sports Geek podcast and episodes will come up. I think it's a really great development when you can look up a guest name like Mark Anderson, my guest today, and podcasts will now be listed in Google search. So looking for a little bit of a bump from Google as a result of that. Before I get into my conversation with Mark Anderson that we recorded before the final series. So as Collingwood had qualified in fourth position, they were scheduled to play Geelong in the qualifying final. So just for context, that's when our conversation happened. But I'm recording this after that first win. So the Pies are now in the preliminary final, waiting for an opponent to see if they can make it to the AFL Grand Final. And have another crack and go one better than last year. Collingwood making the grand final last year, but falling so short against the West Coast Eagles. Before we get into that, a lot of AFL clubs now have wrapped up for the season. NRL the same, into the final season. So it does become the time for digital reviews. And so have you actually done a digital review that actually makes you money, brings in more money? That's exactly what the digital to dollars process is built for. There's no point in just reviewing your content for content's sake and just doing it in the silo of the digital team and on the digital and comms team. You really need to dive in across multiple parts of the business, and that's what the digital to dollars process does. Looking at, first of all, your audiences, knowing your audience, who is consuming your content, who is buying tickets, who is visiting your website, who is in your database. Knowing your audience is paramount. It's the foundation for growth, and also identifying audience segments that you have not yet communicated with. And then you can really dive into your content and understand what you've done, what's worked. Started looking at the analysis of the stats, whether they be video views, page views and the like. And then starting to look at your social media channels, knowing your distribution, which channel is working well for you, which one is over-indexing, which one has an algorithm that is beneficial to what you're doing right now, which one has an algorithm that may have changed and you need to change tactics. So once you have a good basis of knowing your audience, knowing your content, knowing your distribution, you can start understanding and knowing your value. And this is where you can start bringing in money. Unless you're appropriately valuing your digital efforts, you cannot bring in more revenue. So once you know what it costs and the value of producing the content, and also the value of putting that content and your IP on the appropriate channels, you can then start knowing your pitch, the final step of the digital to dollars process, to be able to effectively put a digital campaign and offer in front of your sponsors that will deliver for them and will deliver for you in terms of revenue, whether that is driving more ticket sales, driving more members, or driving more sponsorship activations and getting success for your sponsors, which gets them to the key part of a relationship with a sponsor, renewal. So if you are interested in the digital to dollars process, if you want your digital to bring in more money, if you want more resources, if you want to do more cool stuff in digital, please give me a call. digitaltodollars.com. As always, you can send me an email, Sean@sportsgeekhq.com. But now, as part of the Sports Geek CEO series, here is Mark Anderson, CEO of the Collingwood Football Club. Very happy to be here at Collingwood headquarters, the Holden Centre in one of the boardrooms, looking over at the 1910 Premiership banner where my great-granddad is up there on the wall, to welcome CEO Mark Anderson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Great to have you here, and I didn't realise that bit about your family history, so there's a good point to start.
Yeah, David O'Donoghue played for the Pies back in 1910, and he's up there on the wall. So first of all, I want to get a bit of your backstory. You've been in the Collingwood role for a little bit over 18 months now, but how did you, I guess, find your way into sport?
Yeah, well, I started out in sport.
Yep.
So like many, started out as a phys ed teacher. So I did a Bachelor of Applied Science in phys ed.
Yep.
And started out as a phys ed teacher. Knew that, in 15, 20 years' time, that wasn't going to be my long-term career. So did that for a while and loved it. It was a great role, and but shifted into sports sponsorship, and then went and worked corporately for a while and did my MBA while I was doing that, and then worked overseas, came back to Australia, and sport's always been the passion, and came back to sport, and that's kind of the short version of the journey.
Short version. So I'm going to wind back a little bit. So you were at Essendon in a commercial role over 10 years ago, and then you the other sport roles that were at CEO of Hockey Australia and Swimming Australia. What's the difference between or the challenges of running those like Olympic-based national governing bodies? Like when you're comparing it to sort of what we call clubland here in Australia, what were some of the challenges and opportunities in working those Olympic sports?
Yeah, I loved my time in Olympic sport and wasn't looking to leave, actually. It was really enjoyed it. And what was great about it is, like all sport, really high-quality people, and certainly you're operating in a peak high-performance environment, and in those two sports against the very best around the world. So I love that aspect about it, and the fact that you are working on a global perspective, it does broaden your perspective and your experience and your perspectives, and also some of the skills that you need in a leadership role when you're working globally and into different cultures and teams.
And what are the peaks and troughs like of Lawrence West, who you work with at Hockey Australia? I chatted with him recently, and the perception outside is, it's Olympic year, they're really busy. The other 3 years, not so much. But it's not the case. Obviously, you've got participation and those kind of things. But what are the pressures of those, especially those Olympic years, working in either hockey or swimming, which are both elite sports in the Australian landscape, at least, because we've had medal success?
Yeah, it's a really different rhythm to footy, and the round to round and kind of the pressures that brings in footy. It's a different rhythm, but with that brings a different range of pressures as well. But in either hockey or swimming, you've got in reality 1 to 2 benchmark events every year, and so from a high performance perspective, you're building to those moments, and clearly a lot of preparation goes into that. And then the thing that the public picks up is the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics. So once every 2 years where the spotlight really comes on. But there's a mountain of work that goes into getting teams to that point, and competitions that go to getting the teams at that point. And in reality, in swimming's a great example of where you train all their lifetime, but for 4 years, and it can come down to a hundredths of a second difference. And so that is high performance at its best, that every single little detail makes a difference, and hundredths of a second in an Olympic final once every 4 years can define an athlete and a coach, either good or bad. So it's really the pointy edge of global high performance. There's no better example of it, I reckon.
So you mentioned high performance a few times, and that's a unique part of being a sports CEO. If you're a CEO of a business, you're looking at balance sheets and bottom lines and head counts and profit.
But in a sports CEO role, you're also looking at that plus what does on-field, in-pool, on court, whatever sport you take, you're also looking at that piece. How do you balance that, the business of sport and then the high performance part of sport as a CEO?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what I love about my job is actually you get to work in both environments. And importantly, if we get it right, that you get to mould and meld the two of those together. And so you get high performance off field is as important as high performance on field. So that sort of culture, the thinking, the ethos of that, the positivity around growth and aspiring to be the very best you can, I think is a great aspect of working in sport and in footy clubs or other international elite sports. And I think, the ethos of continuous improvement and striving to be your very best, whether that's in the admin side of the business and in the business itself or on field, there isn't much difference. It's kind of a mindset shift, and I think there's the beauty of it is that you can bring the two together and get that same culture operating across all areas of your business.
Do you think that that overlap of those two has evolved over the last 10, 15 years, whereas it used to be there's footy ops, they do their own thing, and there's the business, they used to be quite separated. Do you think there's more overlap now in trying to, have that high performance, mindset across the whole business? Yeah,
I think there is. I think coaches and high performance managers are getting really understand what drives individuals, and a culture and an environment, the total environment drives individuals and maximises what they can produce. So it's not just about rocking out on a Friday night and a Saturday and the performance in that moment is all that contributes to that performance. It is that whole not only the on-field training that they do, but the environment that they're working in, that being an enjoyable environment, being a creative environment, being a fun environment as well, absolutely makes a difference. And so I think footy teams are getting way better at involving the whole club and understanding the importance of the whole of club. And can speak from the Collingwood perspective, our players are really tuned into the whole of club activities. And good example of that was we did a major fundraiser last week where we raised $1 million for the Salvos and the homeless. All of our players and coaches and staff were involved in that, and it really drove the success of that. And our people, including our players and coaches, love being part of it.
So you come into the role 18 months ago, and Collingwood sells a lot of papers. So everyone knew that there'd been a big review. Peter Murphy had done a review of, the whole club, both the on-field and off-field. What was it like coming into Collingwood at that stage? What were some of the things that you were focusing on in those first couple of weeks?
Yeah, look, a lot of parallels between this role and my entry into swimming as well, because off the back of swimming, as everyone knows, there was the review of the swimming culture and the London Olympics, and I came in as a result of the reviews that had occurred both culturally and performance-wise into swimming. So it was almost exactly the same in that, as you say, the review Peter Murphy did around not our football team but also our business. The recommendations, I could have put them side by side, and the similarities were immense actually in terms of what needed to change. So coming in, I'd in a sense been there, done that in swimming, and so it was great having that template and great work that had been done before me arriving, and then it was a case of ensuring that alignment continued across the club, that we started to focus on those areas that would make a difference for us, and that started to roll. And the beauty of sport is that if you get the dynamic right, then results and performance do tend to follow, and that gives its own momentum and energy, and that's what occurred last year, and clearly it's proceeded into this year as well, and we need to keep that going. We're a long way from where we want to be.
So how do you, when you've got that blueprint in front of you and these are the steps you took at swimming, or this is what the blueprint says, how do you not go making wholesale changes to go, we know we want to get here? How do you, because change is difficult at best of times, how do you do that incrementally? Yeah,
look, I think twofold. One is the work that had already happened before I got here, and then I'll refer to what happened after I got here. I think Peter and Jeff Walsh did a great great job in the footy review, and there were, I think, 39 changes within football. Don't quote me on that number now, but it was a large-scale number of changes. But the majority of those, the vast majority of those, were internal shifts around redefining people's roles, shifting people's roles, and there weren't many people that exited the organisation at all. And so what that was about is getting alignment, making sure that the people that we had were working in their areas of strength and not distracted by those that weren't their areas of strength. And on me coming in, what impressed me about our people was passionate, engaged, wanted to change, wanted to get better. And in me coming through as well, I expected to make some significant change, which is always the case with change management, but I was really pleasantly surprised that we had great people here that were aligned to where we were going and wanted us to get better. So it was tweaking and building on that rather than necessary wholesale changes of people.
Yeah, and the thing is, most people would have heard about, and I think you're probably right. I've heard the number as well. 39 internal changes. I guess on the football side, that's the one that gets all the publicity and and some success on field last year, getting to the grand final. What was the change and the shift on the business side, on the admin side of the business as well when you came in?
Yeah, so we've focused as well on the executive team and the people that sit beneath that. I think one of the things we did with that executive team, which included our teams in that as well as clearly the admin, was to come up with our new strategic plan that was 2018 through to 2025. So being quite aggressive and aspirational around what we look like as a club in 7 years' time.
Yep.
And looking out beyond where we're at now, in 2025, what we're aspiring to be, what was going to drive that, and what were the key changes, which included some of our people in terms of what expertise did we need to bring into the club. So we've embarked on that well. We're, as you say, we're 18 months into that process, and outside of the team results, which people see constantly, making some really good inroads in terms of that strategy and what does drive us as a club and defines us as a club as well.
So you've had 10 years away. You're at Essendon in a commercial role and left there in 2008. You come back to the AFL world 10 years later. How is it different 10 years later?
The scale of it's changed massively in talking dollars and just the nature of it and even whilst it's always had a huge media following, now the amount of attention and focus on it from a media perspective has just gone up a whole nother level as well. So it's mainly been about the scale. The business and I'm talking across the industry, not just Collingwood, hasn't changed massively. The core levers that you've got to pull are much the same. Clubs are rightfully stretching into other areas and trialling some and getting some right, and others kind of putting a line through it. But as a business and a football business, it hasn't changed that much, but the scale absolutely has changed.
Yeah, so like media rights have gone up. There's more members. There's bigger crowds. Digital wasn't even around when you were there previously. I think, and Essendon would have been on those rogue internet deals where they had their own rights to their own website.
Correct.
And the rise of AFL media. So, but the attention, I guess, is almost tenfold or 20-fold than it was 10 years ago. Totally.
And the other key change is the emergence of obviously the women's teams into those environments as well. So 10 years ago when I was that I was at Essendon, you had two teams. You had the AFL team and the VFL team, and it was a big business, but in a way it was a simple business because you had two teams with a list of whatever it was at that stage, 45 or so. So now we've got 7 teams as part of our environment here, and that's occurred really quickly, and about 125 athletes. So that's a massive change in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to, bring up, the expansion of Collingwood outside of football, and also then the inclusion of many women's teams. So Collingwood have a team in the Super Netball, and then also one of the first teams in AFLW. How has that, changed the club, injecting these new teams to go from, like you said, 2 teams previously to now 7 teams across the club? How has that changed the internal mechanics of the club and just how the club feels inside these walls?
Yeah, look, I think it's added an immense amount to us as a club on a whole range of fronts, and the fact that if I start just with from a high performance perspective, with that high performance environment where you've got 120 plus athletes and coaches working across three teams, elite teams, and the support structures that sit across that, learning from other teams, watching them in action, having our netballers train in the gym with our footballers, watching recovery, watching tactics, techniques, all of those things make us a better high-performance environment, and they also make us way better as a culture and a club, I think. And having women as part of our environment and club, it makes us a better organisation, I think, full stop. And then you take that through to the other area of the business where you're looking at attracting sponsors and partners and crowds. It makes us a much more attractive organisation and club to have female athletes in those teams as part of us. There's no doubt about that. As we are in 2019 and moving beyond, all corporates want to be accessing men, women, have access to women's athletes as well as elite men's athletes. So it just makes sense on every level.
And how's the learning curve for the team? Because they've always, promoted the AFL men's competition, and that's what they've always done. And then trying to understand, it's not a new sport, but it is a new sport for everyone who's working internally, because they've always done footy, learning netball, how's that different, learning that the crowd is different for AFLW and they're coming to the game for a different reason. How has that been a learning experience for the internal departments here?
Yeah, a massive learning development, and I think as well it creates, sort of you alluded to it before, it creates a lot of additional work pressures and time pressures, because we're in reality, those two additions in terms of the AFLW and the netball haven't brought a significant amount of revenue to us yet. And so therefore we're having to do more with the same amount of people. And so that really stretches staff, and really mindful of that and not burning our staff out, because it's already an intense industry as it is. But what is evident across the club as well is that our people and our people that work off court and off field as well have really enjoyed having two other teams as part of our dynamic, and investing in our players and getting to know and love our players and telling the story of those players. Our people have really enjoyed doing that and getting involved in match day and presenting the sports. It again just does change the dynamic a bit and broaden our perspective as well in totality. So I think, we're a better organisation externally through bringing those teams in, and I think we are absolutely a better organisation internally with our staff kind of being challenged and having other opportunities outside of just men's AFL teams. Yeah,
because it's like, you've got hundreds of years of history and stories around Collingwood as a club, and now you've got effectively two new teams that are making it now and making their own history from the get-go. So, you may get a new Collingwood fan just via netball or just via AFLW, and that's a massive opportunity for Collingwood to attract new fans, because not all fans are like me and just be told by their dad that they're a Collingwood fan. There's a lot of them, but there's a real opportunity to go and get new fans, whether they be boys or girls, that are following these new teams.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in respecting the past in creating the future, and we're sitting in our old boardroom here, and you mentioned the 1910 premiership one. I'm looking over your shoulder now, and there's one of 1919 up there that you look at the build on those guys that there in 1919. They've got massive guns on them, and it's that great working class ethos of Collingwood and where we grew out of, and we've got a fabulous history, clearly, as everyone knows, and we absolutely celebrate that. But you then reflect through to both our netball team and AFLW team. We're three years old, and as you say, they're getting the opportunity to rewrite and create their own history. And that's, you look back in 125 years' time as a women's player, I was part of the first team at Collingwood in those teams. That's an amazing honour. And actually with that, which we reinforce with our teams, it's an honour, but it also comes with responsibility. And as with our AFL players, they've got to respect the history and create their own. But very true of our women's players that are, in the third or fourth season of their competitions and get to create history in a way.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of Collingwood is past players and the legends that have gone before, and every player that's playing now is going to be in part of that, alumni eventually in their contributions. How much does where we are now, the Holden Centre, play a part in this overall strategy of multi-club, tackling multiple sports, crossing over? How important is this venue to Collingwood's success?
It's a massive part of how we see ourselves and how we want to present ourselves, and it was a key part of the attraction for me coming into the role that we weren't, and I love my footy and men's footy, but we weren't just a men's footy team, that we were a world-leading sports club, and this precinct we sit in is world-leading, and I've had the opportunity in my career to visit many cities and go to many world-leading sporting environments, and this is absolutely a world-leading sporting environment. So the opportunity of building on that and leveraging it further is immense, in my opinion, and we're working on that. But as you look outside the windows, the fact that you've got we exist in what was an Olympic venue. You look across at the MCG, which is a world-class stadium. We've got tennis across the road that arguably is the best run Grand Slam around the world, and probably 6 teams that surround us as well. We are in genuinely a world-class precinct. So my plans are, how do we leverage that further and build on that and build the brand and strength of Collingwood as a modern sporting club?
And so what does that look like? You've recently announced a partnership with Monash. Like, where do you want to take this as a facility and sort of, I guess, leverage it, as you just said? Yeah,
so we've got plans for redevelopment of our facilities. So that's a $70 million project, of which $50 million of that is infrastructure and buildings, and $20 million of that is programs. So we've partnered up with Monash, which is for us a great link and great partnership around developing programs that are world-class research programs, treatment programs, and will also be outward facing, so to the general public as well. So if we get it right, and we will get this right, we'll be at the cutting edge of high performance sports excellence in the medical space and the treatment space. That'll benefit our teams, obviously, and our 125 athletes. But again, if and when we get it right, it will have benefits for all elite sports and community sports. And our key positioning is not only for that to occur within Australia, but that we're leveraging that IP internationally and into Asia and beyond.
Okay, and so we sort of spoke before about you've got to be across multiple things as a CEO. How do you stay on top of all of these things from a business point of view with multiple teams? I guess the business from a high performance point of view. How do you, I guess, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening at the club and where you should be putting your attention? Yeah,
well, it is the great aspects. What I love about my job, I can walk in the morning and know part of what my day looks like, but it can change dramatically, either good or bad in reality, and that's the nature of what we work in, which is great. But the key is having great people, and I'm a big believer in two things. One is establishing a great culture, and part of that is attracting great people. And in attracting the very best that are working in each of the areas, you absolutely have confidence in your people to lead their areas of the business well and have a good, strong relationship with those key individuals. And we've got some ripping people as part of our organisation, and the more well-known ones are Bucks and Jeff Walsh, because it's got the profile, but we've got some quality people right across. Jane Woodland Thompson, who we've picked up heading up our women's sport comes out of both a netball and AFLW backgrounds, doing a great job with our women's teams. We've got great people working in our administration area, and David Emerson, who's been here a long time, but continues to do great things. New commercial head, Damien, that's worked in China with the AFL, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about the strategy, culture, getting great people to deliver on that, and makes my job a lot easier, I must say.
So more and more these days, people looking for metrics and dashboards of success. Are there any particular metrics that you're looking at, or that bubble up, or that hit your desk on a Monday to say, this weekend went well, this weekend didn't go well? Or is that come from your staff? Are there any particular things that you're looking at that are key to the bottom line for you?
Yeah, there are. But and going back to the strategy, we've got 4 key pillars for our strategy, which is an environment of excellence. So that includes all of our elite teams.
Yep.
And so within that, you've got a whole range of metrics, both weekly and more long-term as well. We've got our customer space. So our fan engagement is our second pillar. And they're all equally important, so it's not in order. But very much how do we grow that fan base? So membership's an obvious one, and we've hit a record membership figure of over 85,000 for us this year. But that's also about satisfaction levels.
Yep.
So we not only want a large number, but we want really engaged members, and we've put a lot of focus into that. But it's also, as you say, around the whole social media space and engaging with our fans virtually as well, and what does that look like, and doing that in a way that connects with people. So that's our second pillar. Our home, which we've talked about, is our third pillar. So how do we leverage our physical environment? And that includes Victoria Park as clearly our spiritual home. And then the fourth pillar is our community. So, the beauty of footy clubs is you can make a massive difference if you invest in and connect in with your community. And sort of mentioned that fundraiser is just one example of how we do that. But, those 4 areas are kind of our key strategic pillars. And within that, there's a whole raft of metrics that we look at.
And so from being a CEO and in a social media age, it's very easy to tap in and listen to the fans and find out what they're thinking. Sometimes that can be, a nightmare. As someone who's worked with digital teams, sometimes it's just like, it's not worth reading the comments today, guys. How do you, I guess, listen to the fans and know what the Collingwood faithful are thinking?
Yeah, well, we do put a lot of effort into listening to our fans and actually engaging with the fans. So we've had some great functions actually, and we do it virtually, clearly through our digital space, but we've introduced a couple of times this season fan forums, and just we had one a couple of weeks ago at the club, which was just a great night of low key.
Yeah.
We bring in half our playing list, Bucks talks, Eddie talks, I talk, but more importantly, it's just around that connecting in. And I walked away from that going, we're getting it mostly right at the minute. It was just a really good kind of organic way, which is probably the wrong word because it kind of sounds like a corporate thing, but it's just about connections. It's as simple as that. And what I loved is watching our players engage with our fans and members. Really just natural. It wasn't forced at all. They absolutely wanted to be there. They weren't being forced to be there. And it was just a night where people connected, enjoyed each other's company. We talked a little about where we're heading, both as a team and as a club, but more importantly, it was just about having a good time and enjoying each other's company. And I think what we've tried to reinforce is doing exactly that. It's about how do we connect with fans, how do we connect with our members, and doing that in a way that's real and authentic. And, Bucks there's no better example than that, I reckon, than Bucks actually. He's just such a genuine, authentic person. Yeah,
as someone who's, I've attended a few of the fan forums at the end of the year, and I think, 5 or 6 of them that have happened, and there's not a better person that I don't think that handles that than Bucks. Like, he steps up there, because he does effectively a live job review in front of an angry mob. And I think one year he went up there and said, I'm about to do a presentation, but have I got any questions? And some of the questions were like, why are we so terrible? And why can't the guys kick properly? He answered them all with absolute aplomb, and then went through the review that he had prepared And by the end of it, we're on the right track. Bucks has got us in the right, because he's just a consummate performer. What's your relationship like with Nathan?
Yeah, really good. We spent when I came in, we spent a lot of time as a leadership group in ensuring that we've got alignment, we're on the same page, and actually clearly getting to know each other as people and kind of what makes it work as well. And so we're very aligned in that values and really understanding people and connecting with your people makes a massive difference, and those things that will drive a difference in performance are getting the very best out of your people and understanding what it's going to contribute to that. So really good. We've also driven honesty, just open conversations, and nothing's held back, and that's with Bucks as well as all of the executive team and in fact across the board. So if we've got a problem, what we've done is sort of front into the problem, have the conversation, solve it, move on. Similarly, when we've got opportunities, do exactly the same. But no, he's a ripper, and which will surprise no one, and been ultra impressed with him, not only as a coach but more importantly as a person. Just that genuine, authentic, really good guy. And I've had the benefit of working with some cracking coaches, including she's back in that Essendon era, but Rick Charlesworth in the hockey era, who's a world-class coach, and Jack O'Haran in swimming, who similarly is a world-class coach. So I've seen a number of world's best, and Bucks rates right up there.
And is there similarities across those guys? Because again, it's coaching is coaching. It's 90% mental and 10% instructing them what to do. Is there similarities between the Rick Charlesworth and the Nathan Buckleys in how they go about it?
Totally. Absolutely is. You look at high performance coaches and people, and the attributes and the characteristics are the same. And I caught up with Rick when we went and played West Coast recently, and we had exactly that chat around, because he worked with Freo for a while back
Jared
number
Neesham
of years.
days.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So it was a long time ago, but we were talking, he mentors some footy coaches now, and we're talking around how much technical expertise and how much just attributes of great coaches, and in his view, exactly that. 90% is just coaching philosophy and working with people. You need the 10% technical excellence in each sport, but absolutely great coaches are great coaches.
And then the other side, being in the Collingwood CEO role, you have a very powerful president, with Eddie Maguire being both a media player. He's on the radio every morning. What's it like working with Eddie as CEO and president?
Yeah, we've developed a really good relationship, and similarly to that, saying that about Bucks before, was around coming in and building a really good open relationship and being able to talk about everything with him as well. So that's a dynamic and a relationship that's working really well. Eddie's got amazing assets that he brings to the club, and the amount of time he's been here, his passion has not dimmed 1%. He's so passionate about the club and about ensuring we're the very best. And I had the benefit of working with John Bertrand as president at swimming. So they're, in some ways, a bit like your comment about coaches, in some ways incredibly similar, very different people, but the passion that they've both got, the fact that they're focusing on being the very best that they can, and that for the organisations. And similarly, again, the doors that both of them could open, there's not a door in Australia that either of them can't open. And so the connections that they have and how you're able to leverage that is a massive advantage for me in the CEO role in both organisations, and certainly with Eddie and Collingwood here.
Effectively, there's like a bat phone. You just say there's something we know Eddie can find that person or open that door or get that meeting.
Yeah, exactly. And also, he's a great thinker and entrepreneurial thinker, and so he brings great ideas to us as well, and similarly. So and the beauty of that is making sure, going back to the strategy conversation, is making sure that we assess the opportunities as to how they're going to best benefit us in the long term, and devoting the effort and the energy to those things that are going to make a difference. And so we've become really disciplined and good at doing that, which means it actually can maximise Eddie's benefit even more, because you've got him focused on the things that can make us a real difference for us.
And so, again, one of the other unique things about being in sport, if you're just running your own business, it's you against everybody else. In sport and in clubs, you're part of a league. So, in this sense, Collingwood is part of the AFL or Super Netball in the netball sense. How do you and the club-league relationship is ever evolving? I've worked on both sides of it and so see it from both angles. How much do you work on, I guess the picking your battles, which fights do you want to get in with, with head office, and how much do you worry about, hey, our strategy is about us and we can't control what we can't control?
Yeah, there's a great quote from my last gig that I use, and winners fight for things that matter and losers fight for everything. It came from a Queen's Counsel and I thought it's a great line, because I think you do pick the things that are actually going to matter and make a difference. And so whether that's opportunities and or you're picking a battle, don't just fight everything, because it's a waste of energy and focus and attention. And so what are those areas that will make a real difference for you and are battles that are worth fighting? And more importantly, where are areas that you work with the AFL to increase the benefit to both them and us? And we spent a lot of time making sure our relationship with the AFL is strong, but we are in the great position as Collingwood that we can kind of chart our own course and head forward. But we do so, with Collingwood's interest very much at the forefront, but also understanding we work in a competition that we want to thrive and succeed in totality.
So what's your AFL game day look like? How important is that to your overall role? Yeah,
it's game day. It's kind of most of the things are done when you head into game day, and so for us, we've got a lot of corporate events that sit around game day, and our team do a great job of delivering that. So we'll have corporate hospitality. We'll have suites that we've at our venue at the MCG that we've sold. Our membership team do a great job with our ticketing and membership, and then directly and personally, we have President's Function every second week, or our home matches, which are massive for us. And Eddie is a great public face of those President's Functions. So your pre-match, whether it's an away game or a home match, is rolling into the President's or Chairman's Functions for the clubs, and that's kind of 2 hours leading in. And I love my footy, so I do like to, once the bounce goes, and there's nothing I can do clearly, and enjoy watching and supporting the guys, and try to get into space where you can do that and not get distracted by other discussions. You
get to be a fan for 2 hours effectively.
Yeah, correct. But also a fan that kind of that is a supportive fan, and I say that intentionally. It's one where you get to care for everyone that works in here and see how much effort goes into. So you're kind of there riding every bump with them, and knowing also that mistakes happen, but everyone's trying to do their very best. And so you ride the wave, but very much a supporter in the true sense of the word. But love the footy, and it's nice to kind of carve out that 2 hours to actually enjoy as much as you can in this gig. The footy side of it as well.
It is a tiny bit of the reward you get working in sport, in that you are there and you get to ride the highs a little bit higher because you are part of the team, even though you're not out there pulling on the boots, because you're part of the wider team. It's something that I think everyone talks about, the glamour of working in sports biz, but then there's a couple of times when you're in a big game, you're like, hey, soak it up. These are what all the long hours for, and the weekend work. You've got about at least both yourself and then everyone who's working at Collingwood to take those little moments and say, oh, this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah, and you kind of you get to reflect afterwards, because when you're in the moment, you kind of you realise, and last year was a great example of where the final series was massive for us in terms of we hadn't appeared for 5 years, and so there was so much that needed to happen off field in preparation for that, and for the teams and for us. And so our staff, everyone worked incredibly hard, and so you're very much focused on the delivery and getting it done. And even from a footy perspective, you're certainly not enjoying it. You are going in nervous anticipation. You probably balance it out as much as possible, but you are nervous going in, and you're hopeful, but you don't necessarily enjoy it until after the final siren. A bit like the players, you get to soak it up and enjoy it for that moment, and then you refocus and away you go. But that doesn't discount in any way. You absolutely feel very fortunate that we're in an industry that you're kind of doing stuff that you love and you've got a passion for. And every day I get up, I'm mindful of, in the industries I've worked in and the clubs and organisations, incredibly fortunate.
We spoke a little bit about some of the partners. There was a pretty significant renewal with Emirates Airlines passing 20 years with Collingwood and renewing, which is not unheard of, but like the length and the commitment of a sponsor being on many years. How important was that renewal, and I guess the partnership with Emirates? Massive,
Sean, and that the extension's for 5 years, and will take us through to 25 years, and so. In no way do we underestimate how big an achievement that is. We actually think it's probably the longest sponsorship globally that Emirates has had. And that comes down to a couple of things and sort of reinforces some earlier comments I made that it's about people. And so, the fact that Eddie and Boutros, who's a key player at Emirates in Dubai, were there for that first deal, and in fact David Emerson as well, and right through to now, great connection with our people, and we trust each other implicitly. They know where we're going, and then importantly though, you got to deliver, and so the kind of the metrics around what we can produce. From an attendance perspective, from a broadcast and ratings perspective, leveraging of other partners, it kind of reinforces what we've got and the strength of what we've got. So it's a tick on both fronts. It's kind of about quality people aligning, but also then what the organisations are able to do together and commercially. So a great win, and we're really beneficial that we've got long-term partners and CGU and La Trobe Financials, etc. We've got some great partners that are kind of ensure that we're really strong financially and we are able to chart our own course.
And one of those things, being able to chart your own course, is being able to step away from poker machines and gambling sponsors and making a stand on that as a club. Is that, again, big decision, but it also fit into what you're trying to do from a community pillar? Yeah,
bang on, Sean. And a really big decision for the club because, we probably lose about $1.5 million a year that you've got to replace. So it's not an easy decision, but united across the club from a board perspective, exec perspective, and all of staff around. That's a great decision for us as a club, and in a club that started in a working class environment and wants to give back. Rather than we weren't comfortable staying in the gaming space, and so we've exited out of that, and so been great to bring Coles on board. They they came on board partly. A big part of the reason was because we're doing some great work in the community space and contributing to the homeless and our Indigenous programs, etc. So great part of the club. It's what makes great footy clubs, I reckon, the work that you can do in the community space, and I reckon for our players as well. The next generation of players coming through. This really drives them, this sort of stuff, and the Brodie Grundys, the Darcy Moores of the team as that next emerging group of leaders that really drives them. And that's not Scott Pendlebury's a great example of one of our senior leaders that really values this sort of work as well. So as a club, strategically, it's a great place to be in. We've taken a hit financially in the short term, but we absolutely believe it's the right call for the club, and everyone's absolutely embraced that.
And definitely what you said, the younger generation, not just players, but out in the community, are more community-minded. They are the ones leaving school to complain about climate change and do things in the community. So I guess having Collingwood align that, going forward fits better with what the fans want as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think one of the other areas that we're wanting to make a difference in is women in the community, and so having great women leaders as part of our 4 women's teams is a great example of that as well. And so I think and that engaging with a broader membership and fan base is a pivotal part of that for kind of the next generation and what does modern Collingwood look like.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I've got the Sports Geek closing 5. Apologies because I know I haven't given to them. So these are questions without notice.
Pressure's on.
Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I do. It was actually a Collingwood match, and this shows my age, but it was at Windy Hill. I'm a northern suburbs boy originally, so Windy Hill versus the Bombers.
Okay. Mine was at Vic Park standing on some steel cans, I think, as a 7 or 8 year old, I think it was. I don't think doesn't exactly tick the box of OH&S and that kind of safety these days.
We did love it, though.
Did love it. You would have been at a fair few sports events in your time. Do you have a favourite food memory, or do you have a go-to food that you have at a sport event?
At a sport event? No, look, just remember at Vic Park the meat pie couldn't go wrong, and I used to sneak in front of the social club, so with my cousins actually, because the whole family's Collingwood, and so we'd do the clearly we're in the outer. We'd get the pie and the Coke, and we'd sneak back in front of the social club like we'd just come out to buy our pie and Coke. It was a winning strategy. We got the pie and we got to stand above the players' race, so it was a win on both fronts.
Terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning?
It is the AFL app, so tend to tune in and see what the news is going.
Latest news.
Yeah, correct.
There's no hey, I better check if something's happened overnight. Where do you go for that?
Well, yeah, before I jump onto the apps, I'm always onto my phone to see clearly if I've got any phone calls or texts, which can wake me up at 4 a.m. in the morning as well. Thankfully, there haven't been any of those. But always onto the phone and the emails before I jump onto an app. So yes, but most mornings I'm tracking okay.
No, that's all right. Is there someone that you either follow or read or look up to that the Sports Geek podcast listeners should follow, and why?
Look, I don't have a specific person, and the beauty of my gig is I've got to work with some amazing people over the time, and I've mentioned a few, but there'd be another 20 that I could mention around the beauty of sport, and why I've also loved my Olympic gigs is that you get to do that on an international level and tap into world best people as well. So what I put a lot of effort into staying connected with quality people and world-class people, and when I've got either a problem or an opportunity, sort of bouncing that off them, and how did you deal with that, or have you been in this scenario? That network that I've got around the world in reality, on any given topic, I can reach out to them, and I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to do that.
So last question, and you can answer this both as yourself and then maybe from Collingwood's perspective. What social media platform is your MVP? What's your go-to if you have one?
Look, I'm a bit of a dinosaur actually on social media, and it's a bit intentionally. So I don't play in that space much, and I'll give you a reason. So. Our team's great in that space, and they stay connected and feed through to me anything that's important. But this is a bit deep to finish off the Fast Five.
No, but, we can go deep. That's no problems.
But it is a real challenge for our athletes that are just subjected constantly to social media. And clearly we know it can be a really tough environment, the social media space. So for our players, we try and give them tools and develop some resilience in that space. But I actually don't personally play in that space much. And I tune in when I need to, but I ensure that as a club we're connecting in and our staff do a fabulous job by that. But in all sport, particularly AFL, you get so much noise that surrounds you. And as a CEO, I try and cut through the noise and stay focused on what we need to focus on, both from a weekly basis and more importantly from a long-term basis. So what I find, if you get too absorbed in the social media, and particularly as a Collingwood CEO, the distractions that can create and means that you're focused on the wrong areas. And so trying to stay above it, but ensure you got the finger of the pulse. You got to respond when you need to. Is kind of my approach. So I intentionally, it's a long answer.
No, it's not a long
question.
answer. I mean, it's quite valid because in a social media sense, it's like if you sat in the middle of the Collingwood cheer squad, who you love, but they're the noisiest people inside at the ground. It's like sitting there all the time. And you're only getting their point of view, and they're going to always be the noisiest. That's always what you're going to hear. So it can be distracting of, I keep hearing people complaining about this, but it is only a small, loud few.
Yeah, and the key is trying to stay above it, but stay connected in that you know what matters and listening to what matters as well. And also, most importantly, then responding to what matters, but not getting distracted by the other 98 things that are causing grief. So the balance, and hopefully get it right, is, and my people will also definitely get it right around flagging when there's an issue that we've got to pay attention to and hear and listen, and most importantly respond to. And then the rest, it's great for people to participate in that, and it's a massive industry, and people get a lot of enjoyment and satisfaction out of that, but it does create a bit of pain as well. And so it's an interesting one as kind of we think about how we create, and we spend a lot of time in this space around creating a safe environment for our people and particularly our players.
Yeah.
And protecting them from that and knowing how to respond to that whilst also being really engaged with our fans as well is that really important balance.
Yeah, the social one, as someone who, helped people like Harry O'Brien start up using Twitter and working with players. Now if I'm working with a young player and the upside of being on the platform is becoming less and less because it's pretty much, don't listen, don't read your replies, and there is more onus, and I think hopefully the change does come where the platforms themselves look at that and remove bullying, stop seeing stuff. Even just in the last week, the NBA 2K released added the WNBA athletes to NBA 2K, and they released the ratings in the game. And the players who had nothing to do with it were getting abused because their rating was different to LeBron James or equal to, and everyone's it shouldn't be happening. And it's like, well, but that's just your opinion. It doesn't have to go into the mentions in the feed of the athletes. So, it is something that athletes have to be, mindful of. I know same with, if you look at the Olympic athletes, they get this 2 weeks of, intense feedback, whereas at least the AFL, it's smoothed out over 30 weeks. And again, the AFLW athletes coming on board for the first time and being shown to, being out there in the world. There's so many. The peanut gallery wants to have their say, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's a great. It is a great asset for them as well. So if we use AFLW as a great example, the amount of cut through and reach that our athletes, whether it's Steph as our captain or Chloe, both quality individuals, and that team and the players are evolving really well. But that reach that they can create is superb. So it's absolutely the upside of social media that you're not relying just on mainstream free to air and talking Olympic sports where swimming was better because we got our key event each year broadcast. But for many Olympic sports, as you say, you get that 2 weeks of opportunity. The beauty of social media is that you can create awareness, you can create a profile and exposure. And so that's a massive opportunity for our athletes. But with that comes a bit of the curse as well as the blessing. And so, as with all things, it's just about managing it and being aware and how do you help young people navigate through that is kind of our critical role.
And I think it will change as, players come up that have grown up with these platforms being there. They're not going through this learning phase of what is this platform. It always has existed for them. So they have a better idea of how to use it. So they use it. They've sort of taken ownership back, whether it's putting privacy settings on or those kind of things, because they understand a little bit better. So I think there is a case that the athlete will sort of decide how they want to consume it, and touch wood, the platforms are a bit better operators in the space, and I think that will be because they're seeing athletes move from one platform to another platform because they're not getting the feedback and what they want out of it.
Yeah, and I think it also allows that extension of our fans understanding our players as people as well. And so you would have seen some of the data, but the human interest stories are the ones that are really getting the cut through. So, our generation of sort of, and still the case of sort of older white males are still very footy focused. So they want the analysis, they want the deep insight, and they use social media for that as well. Whereas the younger group coming through, it is about the human interest stories. So I think the three top stories of late have been Hawthorn did the piece around the blind Indigenous player.
Yep.
We had Kyron coming into the club and on field that was number 2. And then number 3 was the recent engagement of the 2 umpires. And so it really shows that people are interested in the human interest stories and how do we connect with our great fan base outside of just the footy analysis that clearly we all love as well. But it does offer that broader and deeper fan base that you can, if we get it right, you can reach.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I know you've got another meeting to get to, so I appreciate you coming on, and all the best from a Collingwood fan for the rest of the season.
Thanks, Sean. Been great to talk with you. Thanks, mate. Go Pies.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Mark Anderson. You can connect with him on LinkedIn and be sure to be following Collingwood FC throughout the AFL finals. And also check out other Collingwood teams. As Mark said, they are now more than a single football club with a single team, with multiple teams out there playing. The VFL Women's in the final series. So check out Collingwood FC. You could probably do so via my social channels. I will be sharing on my Instagram stories and as the Pies go through the final series. Again, hoping that they get one step closer and get their hands on the Premiership Cup. This episode is episode 250. That means this episode show notes are at sportsgeekhq.com/250. One thing I will say that is in the show notes is a documentary on the Collingwood Football Club produced by Josh Cable called Inside Out. It's one of the best fly-on-the-wall documentaries I've seen. I'm not just saying that as a Collingwood fan. I thought it was really well produced. For those of you who are in Australia, that is currently available on ABC iView. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. For those of you who are listening in other parts of the world, I have been told it will be available globally soon. But you might be able to see a few of the snippets in the show notes. But yeah, great fly-on-the-wall. It really shows the culture of teams, in this case Collingwood, but then also the transformation of coaching and how it has changed over the years. And in this case, Nathan Buckley has changed over the years to better appeal and better communicate and better connect with his players and with his team overall. I know I looked at it from my point of view as owning a team and an esports team, and some of the things we're trying to put in culturally in at Gravitas. I've already sent it to my team and my coaches to say this is where we want to head. We want to have that kind of connectedness in our team. So before we wrap this up, a few words indulge me from a point of view. Episode 250. It's a big milestone. I want to say thank you to everyone who has appeared on the podcast. People like Mark Anderson, who have given up their time to chat with me, to share their knowledge, share their insights, share their stories, tactics, and strategies with you. I really do appreciate the time that they give up. And then my second thing is to thank you, the listener. If I wasn't getting downloads and feedback, and if my guests weren't getting feedback, there would be no point in doing this in doing this podcast. So thank you very much for supporting it over the years. 250 episodes, over 400,000 downloads now. Absolutely humbling. Stacks of Apple podcast reviews. If you haven't left a review, please go do so. It does help bump on the rankings. But what I really do appreciate is when you share the podcast with someone, whether it be a colleague, via word of mouth. I know it's not trackable. I can't track it via digital, but I do really appreciate it. And then also when you do reach out and tell a guest that you've listened to the episode, I really do appreciate it. So 250 episodes. And so that leads me to a point here where I'm going to introduce a Patreon option for everyone who listens and consumes the content that I produce and my team produce. So if you're not sure what Patreon is a crowdfunding membership platform. It allows people to connect with creators in a subscription type manner. It allows them to build relationships. So why do Patreon? This is very much a steal with pride moment. You've heard me use the phrase steal with pride in seeing what other people are doing and best practice and how you can make it a tweak for what you do. I'm a long time Patreon subscriber in supporting numerous content creators who produce either content. So I'm a subscriber with the guys at Snowball Esports. I really like the content they're producing. And also some podcast producers, Will Anderson. I like supporting his podcast because I'm a regular listener to his podcasts. And another guy that another one that I support is James Cridland, who creates a newsletter in the podcasting space called Pod News. And I mentioned stealing with pride because I've completely stolen his implementation in what he does with Pod News. Because, yeah, if you go and check out him, and if you're into podcasting, I'd highly recommend checking out his newsletter. Much like mine, it's available free. But what he's done in his Patreon subscription is gives people like myself an opportunity to support his efforts and say thank you for producing regular content that helps me. And he also gives a simple way for sponsors and brands to reach and show support to both the podcast, the content I produce, and also his audience. So I want to do the same thing. So why am I doing it? Obviously, it's going to help pay for the costs to produce the podcast. And again, a shout out to James, my podcast editor, who has been editing the podcast for the last, and I'm probably I should have checked the notes beforehand, but at least the last 100, 150 episodes, James. So thank you very much. DJ Joel has been there from the beginning doing the voiceovers for the podcast. So thank you again to DJ Joel. Jolie has been producing the podcast and helping book the interviews and the like. So there's costs involved in that, and that's where the Patreon funds will go to. And then also it's a method for sponsors wanting to reach the Sports Geek audience. So I really like the way that James has gone about doing it. And so I think this gives us a nice, easy way for sponsors to get involved and be connected with the Sports Geek audience and show that they're supporting the efforts that we're doing in content creation across both the podcast, and then also Sports Geek News, which you can get on a regular basis. And then all the articles that I share and curate on my social media channels. So there's going to be 3 levels. There'll be a standard supporter level. If you've been consuming the content and like the podcast and read the EDMs and those kind of things, again, my humblest thanks. They're all staying free. This is not an announcement that everything's going behind a paywall. That's not how Patreon works. This is just a way for you to show your support. And so you can do that at $4 or more per month. You decide. And when you sign up, you'll get a name check. You'll get a thank you on the podcast for signing up, and just let me know, and I'll send you a Sports Geek laptop sticker to show more people that you're listening. But if you're a business and you want to connect with the audience and you want to have your name and brand connected and associated with the podcast, if you're a listener and like the content and like the conversations, for 50 or more per month, you'll be able to get your logo and link in every single podcast show notes. So that's every episode, not just new ones. So that's over 250 episodes from next week. And then you'll also get a logo and link at the bottom of every Sports Geek News email that goes out every week. And obviously I'm going to say thank you and a shout out to you when you come on board. So this is a great way for you to show your support for the sports digital industry globally, and to be recognised by guests and listeners alike. because there might be people that come on as a guest that might not be listeners, that then become listeners, those kind of things. So that'll be a silver supporter. And then the gold supporters, if you want to pitch in more than $150 per month or more, if you wish, you will get all of those options of getting your logo and link and signifying you're a gold supporter in the podcast show notes. That will be 250 episodes across those, a logo and link in the bottom of every Sports Geek news. And obviously you'll get a shout out. And as a gold supporter, you'll get a shout out at the intro of the podcast when you do come on board. And if you like, it's completely optional. If you want to have a guest or nominate a guest, whether it be someone in your organisation to highlight how you can help Sports Geek podcast listeners, or you might want to highlight one of your clients that are using your product or connecting fans. You'll have that option as a gold supporter. So you can go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon, Patreon, or if you look for my name, Sean Callanan, on Patreon, you'll be able to sign up. I'd love your feedback on this is an option. As I said, this is not me saying there will be a paywall. This is a method for you to show your support, say you listen, and also if you're a sponsor or you want to get your brand associated with the podcast and connected with the Sports Geek community and listeners and subscribers, this is a method for you to do that. So thank you for everyone who's listened this far in this podcast. Thank you very much for my guest in this episode, Mark Anderson, but also thank you for the tremendous support over the years for 250 episodes. I'm looking forward to powering on towards 300, towards 400, and really towards 500. Why wouldn't we want to be pushing to that magical number? So thank you very much again. As always, you can contact me via social media at Sean Callanan or Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.
Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.